Sergeant Keith Ross stood rigid as the Cardassian female officer, Ymir, pressed her body against him in the cramped confines of the interstellar transport. Her scales glistened with sweat, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. This was not how he'd envisioned his crucial mission to save a distant Cardassian outpost from an unknown threat. "Sergeant Ross, I apologize," Ymir said, her voice strained. "It's the mating season. I'm trying to control myself." Keith nodded, acutely aware of the gravity of their situation. The United Earth Defense Force had received an urgent distress call from the outpost, and High Command had selected him to lead a small team. The mission was pivotal for maintaining the fragile alliance between humans and Cardassians. Failure could lead to interstellar conflict. As the ship's AI droned on about Cardassian biology and the intense hormonal surges during mating season, Keith's mind raced. He needed to focus on the mission briefing, but Ymir's erratic behavior made it challenging. One moment she was professionally detached, the next overtly flirtatious. The ship lurched, interrupting Keith's thoughts. "Warning," the AI announced. "Ship systems malfunctioning. Prepare for emergency landing on nearby moon." Keith's training kicked in. He secured Ymir and himself as the transport plummeted toward the barren lunar surface. The impact rattled his bones, but they survived. As the dust settled, Keith assessed their situation. They were trapped in a small escape pod with limited resources, isolated from the rest of the team. Ymir's eyes were wide, her chest heaving. "Sergeant," she said, her voice husky, "we need to establish contact with our superiors." Keith nodded, trying to ignore the way Ymir's body trembled with each movement. He activated the emergency beacon, hoping it would penetrate the interference caused by the unknown energy signature they detected earlier. Long-range scans had revealed widespread destruction at the outpost. Whatever threat they faced was formidable. Keith knew he had to uncover its nature and complete the mission, all while managing Ymir's increasingly difficult-to-control mating instincts. As he worked on the communication systems, Ymir's hand brushed against his arm. The touch sent visible shivers through her body. Keith steeled himself. He had to find a way to handle this unprecedented situation, maintain the diplomatic balance between their species, and save the outpost. The fate of the Alliance, perhaps even the galaxy, rested on his shoulders. Keith took a deep breath, his mind racing to formulate a plan. He was a seasoned soldier with an exemplary combat record, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. "Ymir," he said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air, "I need you to focus. Can you tell me more about the threat we're facing?" Ymir nodded, visibly struggling to concentrate. "The reports were fragmented," she managed, "but they spoke of an energy weapon unlike anything we've encountered before." As Ymir continued her briefing, occasionally pausing to compose herself, Keith's resolve strengthened. He would complete this mission, navigate Ymir's unpredictable behavior, and uncover the mysterious threat. The human race had faced countless challenges in their journey to the stars, and he wouldn't let this one defeat him. With determination in his eyes, Keith turned to face the desolate lunar landscape visible through the pod's viewport. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was ready to face them. For Earth, for the Alliance, and for the future of interstellar peace. Keith's eyes narrowed as he scanned the desolate lunar landscape through the pod's viewport. The crash landing had been rough, but his quick thinking and military training had ensured their survival. As the dust settled around their battered escape pod, he turned to Ymir, who was struggling to unbuckle her harness with trembling hands. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Ymir nodded, her scales glistening with a sheen of sweat. "Yes, Sergeant, but I'm finding it difficult to concentrate." Keith helped her out of her restraints, acutely aware of her body's heat as he worked. Once free, Ymir stumbled out of the pod, her breathing labored. Keith followed, immediately assessing their surroundings. The escape pod had carved a deep furrow in the moon's surface, scattering debris across the barren rocky terrain. Keith's mind focused as he surveyed the damage to their vessel. The communication array was a twisted mass of metal, and several critical systems were offline. "We need to salvage what we can and set up a temporary base," Keith said, his mind already formulating a plan. "Can you help me gather supplies?" Ymir nodded, visibly making an effort to focus. As they worked to create a makeshift camp around the crash site, Keith couldn't help but notice Ymir's frequent glances in his direction. Her eyes seemed to linger on his arms as he lifted heavy pieces of equipment, and she appeared distracted by his movements. "Sergeant Ross," Ymir said suddenly, her voice low and hesitant, "I hope you don't find this inappropriate, but I'm curious about human mating practices." Keith nearly dropped the canister he was carrying. Well, that's not exactly relevant to our current situation, Ymir." Of course, she said quickly, her scales flushing a deeper shade. "It's just, the mating urge is making it difficult for me to think about anything else. Perhaps if I understood more about human reproduction, it would satisfy some of my curiosity." Keith sighed, realizing he needed to address this issue if they were to work together effectively. As they continued setting up their shelter, he gave Ymir a brief, clinical overview of human biology and relationships. She listened intently, occasionally asking questions that made Keith grateful for the physical labor that hid his own discomfort. As night fell on the lunar surface, Keith activated their long-range scanners, hoping to locate their missing team or gather intel on the mysterious threat. The equipment hummed to life, its display flickering in the dim light of their shelter. "Sergeant, look at this," Ymir said, pointing to an anomalous reading on the scanner. "That energy signature. It's similar to what we detected at the outpost before communications were lost." Keith leaned in, studying the readout. The source appeared to be coming from a nearby cave system. He weighed their options, knowing that investigating could be risky but potentially crucial to their mission. "We need to check it out," he decided. "Gather what supplies and weapons you can carry. We'll head out at first light." As they prepared for their expedition, Ymir's condition seemed to worsen. Her movements became erratic, and she struggled to focus on simple tasks. Keith found himself having to repeat instructions and guide her hands as they packed their gear. "I'm sorry, Sergeant," Ymir said, her voice thick with frustration. "I'm trying to control it, but the urges are getting stronger." Keith nodded, his mind racing. He needed Ymir functional if they were to have any chance of completing their mission and surviving this hostile environment. An idea struck him, and he turned to the pod's damaged computer system. "Computer, access database on Cardassian biology," he commanded. The system sputtered to life, and Keith spent the next hour researching Cardassian mating cycles and potential ways to manage the symptoms. As dawn broke over the lunar horizon, Keith and Ymir set out towards the cave system. The barren landscape seemed to stretch endlessly before them, broken only by jagged rock formations and deep craters. Keith took point, his weapon at the ready, while Ymir covered their rear, her movements still somewhat unsteady. They reached the mouth of the cave as the sun climbed higher in the sky. The entrance yawned before them, a dark maw in the face of a towering cliff. Keith activated his helmet lights and motioned for Ymir to do the same. "Stay close," he whispered as they entered the cave. The temperature dropped as they ventured deeper into the cavern. Their footsteps echoed off the rocky walls, and Keith felt a prickle of unease run down his spine. As they rounded a bend, Ymir gasped. "Sergeant, look at the walls," she said, her voice filled with awe. Keith's eyes widened as he took in the sight before them. The cave walls were covered in intricate glyphs, unlike anything he had ever seen. They seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly energy. "These aren't Cardassian or human in origin," Ymir said, running her hand over the markings. "Could they be related to the threat we're facing?" Before Keith could respond, a low rumbling sound echoed through the caverns. The floor beneath their feet began to tremble. "Move!" Keith shouted, grabbing Ymir's arm. But it was too late. The ground gave way beneath them, and they plummeted into darkness. Keith's world became a blur of motion and impact as they tumbled down a steep incline. When they finally came to a stop, he found himself in a vast underground chamber, his body aching from the fall. As Keith struggled to his feet, he heard Ymir groan beside him. He helped her up, his eyes adjusting to the dim light of the cavern. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. The chamber was filled with advanced technology, unlike anything he had ever encountered. Holographic displays flickered to life around them, showing star charts and what appeared to be detailed invasion plans, targeting both human and Cardassian worlds. "By the gods," Ymir whispered, her eyes wide with shock. Before they could process what they were seeing, movement caught Keith's eye. Shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, their forms obscured by some kind of energy field. They were clearly not human or Cardassian. Keith's hand tightened on his weapon as the realization hit him. They had stumbled upon the source of the threat to the Cardassian outpost, an unknown alien species with hostile intentions towards both their civilizations. As the mysterious aliens advanced, Keith and Ymir found themselves backed against a console. Keith's mind raced, assessing their options. They were outnumbered and outgunned, trapped in an unfamiliar environment with no backup. The aliens raised their weapons, energy crackling ominously around the barrels. In that split second, Keith made his decision. He grabbed Ymir and dove behind the nearest console, the air sizzling as energy blasts passed over their heads. As they crouched behind their meager cover, Keith met Ymir's eyes. The fear and confusion he saw there mirrored his own feelings. Their mission had just become far more complex and dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. They needed to survive this immediate threat and find a way to warn their civilizations about the impending invasion. Keith checked his weapon and took a deep breath. The fate of two worlds now rested on their shoulders. As another barrage of energy blasts rocked their shelter, he knew their real battle had only just begun. The aliens' energy weapons carved glowing paths through the air, forcing Keith and Ymir deeper behind the console. Keith's mind raced, analyzing their options as the acrid smell of ozone filled his nostrils. His eyes darted around the chamber, searching for an escape route. A narrow opening caught his attention, a passageway leading deeper into the cave system. It was their only chance. "Ymir, on my signal, we make a run for that tunnel," Keith whispered, gesturing with his chin. Ymir nodded, her scales glistening with sweat. Her breathing was ragged, and Keith could see the struggle in her eyes as she fought to maintain focus. "Now!" Keith shouted, grabbing Ymir's hand and pulling her to her feet. They sprinted across the open space, energy blasts sizzling past them. Keith felt the heat of a near miss on his cheek as they dove into the passageway. The tunnel was dark and cramped, forcing them to run in a hunched position. The sounds of pursuit echoed behind them as they navigated the twisting corridors. Keith's ears strained to gauge the distance of their attackers, while his eyes struggled to adjust to the dim light. Ymir stumbled beside him, her movements becoming increasingly uncoordinated. "Keep moving," Keith urged, supporting her with one arm while his other hand traced the rough cave wall. They emerged into a larger cavern, its ceiling lost in darkness above them. Strange, geometric formations jutted from the walls and floor, glowing faintly with an inner light. Keith realized they had stumbled upon some kind of abandoned alien outpost. As they paused to catch their breath, Ymir collapsed against a nearby formation, her body trembling violently. "Sergeant," she gasped, I can't focus. The urges are too strong." Keith's heart raced as he scanned the alien technology around them. His eyes landed on a small, cylindrical device pulsing with a soft blue light. Acting on instinct, he snatched it up and examined it closely. There was something familiar about its energy signature. With a deep breath, Keith activated the device. A low hum filled the air, and a shimmering field of energy expanded outward. The pursuing alien's calls suddenly became muffled and distant. "I think this is interfering with their sensors," Keith said, relief evident in his voice. "We should be safe for now." But as he turned to Ymir, he realized they faced another immediate crisis. The Cardassian was on her knees, her scales flushed a deep crimson. Her eyes were unfocused, and her breath came in short, sharp gasps. "Ymir, talk to me. What's happening?" Keith knelt beside her, concern etched on his face. "The mating urge," Ymir managed between labored breaths. "It's overwhelming. I can't think straight. My body feels like it's on fire." Keith's mind raced back to his earlier research on Cardassian biology. He remembered reading about the potential health risks of prolonged hormonal imbalance during their mating cycles. With a sinking feeling, he realized that without some form of release, Ymir's condition could become life-threatening. He swallowed hard, weighing his options. Their mission, their lives, and possibly the fate of their civilizations hung in the balance. He couldn't afford to lose Ymir to her biological imperatives. "Ymir," Keith said, his voice low and steady, "I think I can help you alleviate your condition, but it would involve physical intimacy. Are you comfortable with that?" Ymir's eyes widened, a mix of surprise and relief washing over her face. "Yes," she whispered. "Please, Sergeant. I need your help." What followed was an intense and awkward encounter. Keith relied on his limited knowledge of Cardassian physiology, guided by Ymir's gasps and murmured instructions. He tried to maintain a clinical detachment, but the alien nature of her body and the urgency of the situation made it a uniquely challenging experience. As they lay together afterward, catching their breath, Keith was acutely aware of the bizarreness of their circumstances. Here they were, surrounded by ancient alien technology, hiding from an unknown threat, having just engaged in interspecies intimacy. Ymir stirred beside him, her scales returning to their normal hue. "Thank you, Sergeant," she said, her voice stronger and clearer than it had been in hours. "My mind feels clearer now. I can focus again." Keith nodded, relieved to see her condition improving. "Good. We need to figure out our next move." As they dressed and gathered themselves, Ymir's attention was drawn to the alien technology surrounding them. She ran her hands over the strange consoles, her eyes narrowing in concentration. "Sergeant, some of this is familiar," she said, excitement creeping into her voice. "These symbols, the design of these devices, they're similar to artifacts depicted in ancient Cardassian legends. Could these aliens have visited our worlds in the past?" Before Keith could respond, a holographic display flickered to life in front of them. It showed a detailed map of the cave system, with pulsing points of light indicating various locations. "Look," Keith said, pointing to a symbol near the top of the map. "I think that's an exit to the surface. And this," he indicated a larger, more complex icon deep within the caves, "could be their command center." They exchanged a look, both realizing the weight of the decision before them. Attempt to escape and warn their governments, or risk everything to gather more intelligence on the alien threat. The choice was made for them as the alien device in Keith's hand began to sputter, its energy field weakening. The sounds of their pursuers grew louder once more. "We're out of time," Keith said, grabbing what alien technology he could carry. "We need to move, now." They sprinted towards the exit route, the cries of the aliens echoing through the tunnels behind them. The path twisted and turned, leading them through chambers filled with strange machinery and glowing crystals. Keith's lungs burned as they climbed higher, the air growing thinner. Just as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them, they burst out of the cave system into the harsh light of the lunar day. A group of human and Cardassian soldiers stood nearby, weapons raised. "Don't shoot," Keith shouted, raising his hands. "Sergeant Keith Ross and Liaison Officer Ymir reporting in." The soldiers lowered their weapons, expressions of relief and confusion on their faces. A stern-faced human officer stepped forward, his insignia identifying him as Colonel Marcus Steele. "Sergeant Ross, we've been searching for you since the crash," Steele said. "We've detected strange energy signatures all over the moon, and there are reports of increased alien activity near other outposts. What the hell is going on down there?" Keith took a deep breath, acutely aware of the weight of the information they carried. "Sir, we've uncovered evidence of an impending invasion. We need to evacuate immediately and warn High Command." Steele's eyes widened, but he quickly composed himself. "Understood. Everyone, back to the ship. Now." As they boarded the rescue vessel, Keith and Ymir exchanged a meaningful look. The bond forged between them in the caves was evident, a silent acknowledgement of the trials they had faced together and the challenges that lay ahead. The ship's engines roared to life, lifting them away from the lunar surface. Keith watched through a viewport as the mysterious moon grew smaller, knowing that the alien threat still lurked within its depths. As the darkness of space enveloped them, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a much larger conflict, one that would test not only the human Cardassian alliance, but also the newfound connection between himself and Ymir. Ymir, as the rescue ship accelerated away from the lunar surface. The tension in the air was palpable as the gravity of their discovery settled over the crew. Suddenly, a shrill alarm pierced the air, causing everyone to snap to attention. Colonel Steele rushed to the communication console, his face growing grim as he listened to the incoming transmission. "Change of plans," he announced, turning to face the group. "We've just received word from Earth's High Command. Similar alien activities have been detected near key outposts across the galaxy. This isn't an isolated incident. We're looking at a potential full-scale invasion." Keith felt his stomach drop. He exchanged a glance with Amir, seeing his own concern mirrored in her reptilian eyes. "We're being redirected to a secret joint human Cardassian military base on Nexus 4, Steele continued. "It's the headquarters for a new task force specifically created to counter this threat." The journey to Nexus 4 was tense, filled with speculation and hurried preparations. As soon as they docked, Keith and Emir were whisked away to a high-level briefing. They found themselves in a stark room facing two imposing figures: Admiral Jonathan Hawke, a stern-faced human with steel-gray hair, and Gul Dukat, a tall Cardassian with an air of calculated intensity. "Sergeant Ross, Officer Emir," Admiral Hawke began, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Your report, please." Keith and Emir took turns detailing their harrowing experience on the moon, presenting the alien artifacts they'd managed to salvage. As they spoke, the gravity of the situation became increasingly clear. "This intelligence is crucial," Gul Dukat said, his eyes narrow as he examined a holographic projection of the alien technology. "It may be our best chance at understanding our enemy's capabilities." Admiral Hawke nodded in agreement. "You've done exemplary work. We're assigning you to lead a special operations team. Your mission will be to infiltrate known alien outposts and gather more intelligence." As the briefing concluded, Keith noticed Gul Dukat pull Amir aside. Though he couldn't hear their conversation, the tense set of Amir's shoulders told him it wasn't pleasant. Later, as they made their way to the research facility, Emir was uncharacteristically quiet. "Everything all right?" Keith asked, concern evident in his voice. Emir's scales rippled, a sign of discomfort. "Gul Dukat reminded me of my duty to the Cardassian Union. He expressed concern about my continued collaboration with humans. With you, specifically." The implication hung heavy between them, adding another layer of complexity to their already complicated relationship. At the research facility, they met Dr. Alara Cooper, a human scientist with bright, inquisitive eyes, and Dr. Kalok, her Cardassian counterpart. The two were poring over the alien artifacts, their excitement palpable. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Cooper exclaimed, looking up as Keith and Emir entered. "The technology seems designed to interface with both human and Cardassian biology. It's as if they've been studying us for years." As Keith provided insights from his encounter with the aliens, he couldn't help but notice Dr. Cooper's growing interest in his experiences. Her questions became increasingly pointed, particularly regarding his interaction with Emir during her mating cycle. The human scientist's curiosity created an awkward atmosphere, especially when Emir was present. Meanwhile, Emir found herself captivated by the human couples on the base. She observed their interactions with a mix of fascination and confusion, often misinterpreting social cues and causing unintentional humor. As preparations for their first mission intensified, Keith and Emir were introduced to their special operations team. Lieutenant Commander Jack Wraith Morrison, a ghost-like human with a talent for stealth. Dr. Zarin, a Cardassian weapons expert with a manic gleam in his eye. Corporal Miguel Doc Ramirez, a human medic with a reassuring bedside manner. And Glenn Tellock, a Cardassian tactical officer whose piercing gaze seemed to miss nothing. Their training sessions were intense, combining human adaptability with Cardassian precision. Keith and Emir's complementary skills shone through, but the underlying tension between them threatened to undermine their effectiveness. During a complex simulation of an alien outpost infiltration, their communication faltered. Keith zigged when Emir expected him to zag, resulting in a cascading failure that would have been disastrous in a real mission. As klaxons blared signaling the end of the failed simulation, Keith and Emir stood in the smoking ruins of the holographic alien base, their frustration palpable. "We need to talk," Keith said, his voice low and urgent. Before they could address their issues, alarms blared throughout the base. They rushed to the command center, where Admiral Hawk's grim face told them all they needed to know. "The aliens have launched coordinated attacks on our outer colonies," he announced. "They've abducted thousands of humans and Cardassians. We don't know why, but we need to find out." Gul Dukat stepped forward, his eyes blazing with tenacity. "Your mission is clear. Infiltrate the alien forward operating base on Xavier 9. Gather intelligence on their plans, especially regarding these abductions." As Keith and his team boarded their stealth ship, the weight of their responsibility settled heavily upon them. The fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Keith caught Ymir's eye as they strapped into their seats. In that moment, they both knew that despite their unpurposed feelings, the success of their mission depended on their ability to work together. The ship's engines hummed to life, and as they lifted off from Nexus 4, Keith allowed himself a moment of reflection. They were heading into unknown danger, with the lives of countless humans and Cardassians depending on their success. As the stars streaked past the view screen, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mission would change everything. The stars streaked past the view screen as Keith's mind raced with the enormity of their mission. He glanced at Ymir, her scaled face set in concentration as she monitored the ship's systems. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken tension. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the ship. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Approaching Xavier 9, encountering unexpected atmospheric anomalies." Keith rushed to the cockpit, Ymir close behind. Through the view screen, they saw Xavier 9 looming before them, shrouded in a swirling violet haze. "The planet's surrounded by some kind of electromagnetic field," the pilot reported, his hands flying over the controls. "It's interfering with our cloaking technology and navigation systems." Keith's teeth gritted. "Can we punch through?" The pilot shook his head. "Not safely. We'll have to attempt a manual landing." "Do it," Keith ordered, strapping himself into the nearest seat. He locked eyes with Ymir, seeing his own apprehension mirrored in her gaze. The descent was harrowing. The ship bucked and shuddered as it plunged through the electromagnetic field. Keith's knuckles turned white as he gripped his harness. After what felt like an eternity, they broke through the cloud cover. The landscape below was alien and forbidding. Vast crystalline structures jutted from the terrain, pulsing with eerie light. Energy signatures danced across the ship's sensors, unlike anything they'd encountered before. "There," Keith pointed to a clearing in a dense violet forest. "It's far from our intended drop point, but it's our best option." The landing was rough, but they touched down intact. As the team assembled outside the ship, the true scale of the alien presence became apparent. In every direction, massive structures of unknown design dominated the horizon. Keith surveyed his team. "Change of plans. We'll split into two groups to cover more ground." He nodded to Lieutenant Commander Morrison. "You take Zarin, Ramirez, and Talok. Head north and scout the perimeter of that structure." He pointed to a towering spire in the distance. "Ymir and I will investigate the energy signatures to the east. Report in every 30 minutes. As Keith and Ymir made their way through the alien terrain, the air hummed with an unsettling energy. Strange, bioluminescent plants cast an eerie glow over the landscape. In the distance, they could hear the low thrumming of alien machinery. They crested a hill and froze. Before them lay a massive facility, its architecture a twisted blend of organic and mechanical elements. But it was what they saw inside that made Keith's blood run cold. Through massive viewports, they could see row upon row of stasis pods. Each one contained a human or Cardassian, suspended in a greenish fluid. Alien figures moved between the pods, manipulating complex machinery. "By the Union," Ymir whispered, her scales paling. "What are they doing to them?" Keith raised his binoculars, focusing on the nearest pod. The occupant, a human male, was connected to a web of tubes and wires. As he watched, an alien approached and injected something into the pod. The human's body convulsed, and to Keith's horror, he saw patches of scales beginning to form on the man's skin. "They're combining them," Keith said, his voice hoarse. "Human and Cardassian DNA." Ymir's eyes widened in shock. "But why? What could they possibly gain from... She fell silent as a group of aliens approached the viewpoint. Keith pulled her down behind a rocky outcropping. The aliens' voices were oddly modulated, but their universal translators picked up the conversation. "The hybridization process is proceeding as planned," one alien said. "The combined traits of the humans and Cardassians show great promise." Another alien nodded, its elongated head bobbing grotesquely. "Once perfected, this new species will serve as the perfect colonization force. Their adaptability and resilience will allow us to conquer galaxies previously beyond our reach." Keith felt sick. He turned to Ymir, seeing his own horror reflected in her eyes. "We need to contact the others," he whispered. He activated his communicator, keeping his voice low. "Morrison, come in. We've got a situation." Suddenly, alarms blared from the facility. The aliens below began rushing about in obvious agitation. "Intruders detected!" a voice boomed over unseen speakers. "All units, initiate search protocols." Keith cursed, realizing their communication had been intercepted. He grabbed Ymir's arm. "Run!" They sprinted away from the facility, alien patrols hot on their heels. Energy blasts sizzled past them, scorching the strange vegetation. Keith's mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. "There!" Ymir pointed to a low, dome-like structure, partially hidden by the alien foliage. "It might provide cover." They ducked inside, finding themselves in a room filled with bizarre equipment and glowing containers. The walls were lined with displays showing complex genetic sequences. "It's some kind of medical facility," Ymir said, her scientific curiosity overtaking her fear. She approached one of the machines, her eyes widening. "Keith, this device, I think it's designed for genetic manipulation." Keith kept his weapon trained on the entrance, listening for sounds of pursuit. "Can you make sense of it?" Ymir's fingers danced over the alien controls. "Possibly. If I can decipher its operation, we might be able to use it against them, disrupt their hybridization experiments." As Ymir worked, Keith felt a familiar tension building between them. Her proximity, the lingering effects of her mating cycle, the high-stakes situation, it all combined to create an electric atmosphere. Ymir must have felt it too. She turned to him, her eyes intense. "Keith, I've been meaning to ask about human mating habits, your genetic diversity. It's fascinating. How do you—" A thunderous boom cut her off. The door to the facility began to glow red, melting under some kind of energy weapon. "Later," Keith said, raising his weapon, "we've got company." The door exploded inward and alien soldiers poured through the opening. Keith opened fire, his shots precise and devastating. Beside him, Ymir grabbed what looked like a medical instrument, wielding it like a club. They fought furiously, but the aliens kept coming. Keith felt the searing pain of an energy blast grazing his arm. He stumbled, his vision blurring. "Keith!" Ymir's voice seemed to come from far away. He felt her drag him behind a console. Through the haze of pain, he saw her looking at him with dedication and something else, something primal. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I have to try something." She pulled him towards one of the alien devices. Keith felt a sharp pain, then a rush of strange energy coursing through his body. His vision cleared, his strength returning tenfold. But something else was happening. He could feel Ymir's presence in his mind, her thoughts and emotions mixing with his own. Their newfound mental link amplified every sensation, every feeling between them. As one, they turned to face the oncoming alien horde. Keith could feel Ymir's exhilaration, her fierce perseverance. Together they fought with unprecedented coordination, anticipating each other's moves before they happened. They burst out of the medical facility, leaving a trail of defeated aliens in their wake. But as they emerged into the alien landscape, they saw an army of alien soldiers gathering on the horizon. Keith and Ymir stood side by side, their bodies humming with enhanced power, their minds inextricably linked. The fate of their mission, their teammates, and their species hung in the balance. But as they prepared to face the alien army, one question burned in both their minds. How would their newfound connection affect not just this battle, but their future together? As Keith and Ymir faced the approaching alien army, A new sensation flooded their senses. The mental link forged by the alien device pulsed between them, their thoughts intertwining like strands of DNA. Keith felt Ymir's presence in his mind, her fierce persistence matching his own. "Ready?" Keith asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Ymir nodded, her scales glinting in the eerie light. "Let's show them what we can do." They moved as one, their actions perfectly synchronized. Keith ducked low, Ymir's energy blast sailing over his head to strike the lead alien soldier. He rolled to the side, providing cover fire as Ymir sprinted towards a cluster of crystalline structures. Their enhanced abilities became immediately apparent. Keith's reflexes were sharper, his aim deadly accurate. Ymir's agility had increased tenfold, allowing her to weave through the alien ranks with serpentine grace. Through their link, Keith sensed Ymir's intent. He provided covering fire as she reached a control panel nestled within the crystal formation. Her fingers flew over the alien interface, her mind processing the complex symbols at an unprecedented rate. Suddenly, the air crackled with energy. The alien communication systems erupted in a cacophony of screeches and static. Confusion rippled through the enemy ranks, their coordinated assault falling into disarray. "Nice work," Keith thought. The words transmitted directly to Ymir's mind. "Thanks," she replied silently. "But we need to move. This won't hold them for long." As they fought their way through the chaos, Keith's combat instincts melded with Ymir's technical expertise. When faced with a heavily armored alien vehicle, Keith's tactical assessment flowed into Ymir's mind. She immediately identified a weak point in its energy core, allowing Keith to disable it with a precisely aimed shot. In the midst of battle, Ymir's keen eyes spotted an anomaly in the terrain. "Keith, look!" she called out, pointing to a barely visible seam in the ground. Together they approached the hidden entrance. Ymir's fingers danced over a concealed panel, and the ground split open to reveal a sleek tubular transport system. "An underground network," Keith mused. "This could be our ticket to their command center." They slipped into the transport pod, the door sealing behind them with a soft hiss. The alien interface pulsed with unfamiliar symbols, but with their combined knowledge, they quickly deciphered its operation. The pod shot through the network at dizzying speeds. At each security checkpoint, Keith and Ymir worked in tandem. Keith's quick reflexes allowed him to input override codes as Ymir fed them to him through their mental link, bypassing firewalls that would have taken hours to crack individually. As they approached the central hub, an automated defense system sprang to life. Laser grids crisscrossed the tunnel ahead, shifting in complex patterns. "I've got this," Ymir thought, her mind already processing the pattern. Keith felt the solution forming in their shared consciousness. He moved on instinct, his body twisting and contorting, to slip through gaps in the laser grid that appeared and vanished in milliseconds. They emerged into a vast chamber, its walls lined with pulsating data streams. At its center stood a towering pillar of light, the alien command hub. Ymir immediately set to work, her hands flying over the alien console as she began to download crucial data. Keith stood guard, his enhanced senses on high alert for any sign of danger. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. A synthetic voice echoed through the chamber. "Intruders detected, initiating base-wide lockdown." "We've been made," Keith said, tension evident in his voice. "How much longer?" Ymir's brow furrowed in concentration. "Almost there. Wait, Keith, look at this." On the screen before them, a horrifying image appeared. A stasis pod containing a being that was neither fully human nor Cardassian. Its features were a disturbing blend of both species. "Is that—" Keith began, unable to finish the thought. Ymir nodded grimly. "It's us. They've created a hybrid using our DNA." The implications hit them both simultaneously through their mental link. The aliens weren't just experimenting. They were creating a template for a new slave race. "We need to stop this," Keith said, his tenacity hardening. "Ymir, can you finish the data transfer and find a way to send it back to Nexus 4? She nodded, her scales flushing with dedication. "I can, but what about you?" Keith's gaze turned to the exit. "I'm going after that prototype. We can't let them activate it." As they prepared to split up, the weight of the moment hung between them. Their mental link hummed with unspoken emotions, fear, purpose, and something deeper neither was ready to name. "Be careful," Ymir said, her voice uncharacteristically soft. Keith nodded, squeezing her shoulder before turning to leave. As he raced through the alien corridors, he could feel Ymir's presence in his mind, a constant reminder of what was at stake. The path to the hybridization chamber was a gauntlet of elite alien guards. Keith's enhanced abilities were pushed to their limits as he fought his way through. He wielded alien weapons with instinctive skill, each movement guided by a combination of his own combat experience and Ymir's technical knowledge flowing through their link. Finally, he reached the chamber. The prototype floated in a glowing stasis field, its eyes closed but its presence undeniably alive. As Keith approached, his hand reaching for the control panel, the hybrid's eyes snapped open. Intelligence, alien yet familiar, gazed back at him. The prototype moved with lightning speed, breaking free of its restraints. Keith found himself face to face with a being that was part himself, part Ymir, and wholly unknown. As they circled each other, Keith felt a tremor run through the facility. Through his link with Ymir, he sensed her urgency. She had completed the data transfer, but the aliens had initiated a self-destruct sequence. Time was running out. The prototype lunged, its abilities clearly surpassing even Keith's enhanced skills. As they grappled, Keith realized with growing dread that he might not be able to stop this creature alone. Elsewhere in the facility, Ymir raced through collapsing corridors, her mind reaching out to Keith. She could sense his struggle, feel the prototype's unnatural strength. With the facility crumbling around her, she pushed herself to move faster, knowing that their window for escape was rapidly closing. In the hybridization chamber, Keith found himself pinned against a wall, the prototype's inhuman eyes boring into his. As he struggled to break free, he felt Ymir's presence growing stronger in his mind. She was coming, but would she reach him in time? The prototype's grip tightened, and Keith gasped for breath. The facility shook violently, debris raining down around them. In this moment of desperation, with Ymir racing to his aid and their escape route vanishing by the second, Keith realized that their mission and their very lives hung by the thinnest of threads. Threads. The facility shuddered again, and Keith felt the prototype's grip loosen for a fraction of a second. He seized the opportunity, twisting his body to break free. The hybrid's eyes narrowed, a mix of human persistence and Cardassian cunning evident in its gaze. It lunged at Keith with inhuman speed, its fist connecting with his jaw. Keith stumbled back, tasting blood. He dodged the next blow, using the prototype's momentum against it. The creature crashed into a bank of monitors, sending sparks flying. Keith's enhanced reflexes allowed him to anticipate its movements, but only barely. As they grappled, Keith realized he couldn't overpower the hybrid through strength alone. He changed tactics, targeting the areas where human and Cardassian physiologies merged. A quick jab to a nerve cluster unique to the hybrid's anatomy sent it reeling. The prototype snarled, adapting quickly. It feinted left, then struck with its right hand, fingers splayed in a distinctly Cardassian fighting style. Keith barely managed to deflect the blow, feeling the sting of scaled knuckles grazing his cheek. Through their mental link, Keith sensed Ymir's approach. Her presence in his mind grew stronger, a mix of concern and fierce willpower. He could feel her navigating the treacherous path to the hybridization chamber, dodging falling debris and leaping over fissures in the floor. The hybrid pressed its attack, forcing Keith back towards the stasis field where it had been contained. Keith's foot slipped on a piece of debris, and he fell hard. The prototype loomed over him, its mismatched eyes gleaming with triumph. Suddenly, the chamber door burst open. Ymir entered, her scales glistening with sweat, her chest heaving from exertion. She took in the scene in an instant, her eyes darting from Keith to the hybrid. Without hesitation, Ymir sprinted to a nearby control panel. Her fingers flew over the alien interface, inputting commands at a dizzying pace. The hybrid turned, sensing the new threat. It moved to intercept her, but Keith grabbed its ankle, buying Ymir precious seconds. Ymir's mind raced, processing the alien code faster than any unaugmented being could. She attempted to deactivate the hybrid remotely, targeting its neural interface. For a moment, it seemed to work. The hybrid stumbled, its movements becoming erratic. But then it straightened, its eyes flashing with an eerie light. The creature had access to the alien network, and it began to counter Ymir's efforts. Screens around the chamber flickered to life, displaying cascading streams of alien characters. Keith felt the floor vibrate beneath him as hidden mechanisms activated. Panels in the walls slid open, revealing defense turrets that swiveled to target him and Ymir. The hybrid had turned the chamber's systems against them. "Keith, move!" Ymir's voice echoed in his mind. He rolled to the side just as an energy blast scorched the floor where he had been lying. They weaved through the chamber, dodging energy bolts and the hybrid's relentless attacks. Keith could feel Ymir's thoughts intertwining with his own, strategizing in real time. "We need to overload its neural interface," Ymir communicated silently. "I'll create a feedback loop. Keep it distracted." Keith nodded, engaging the hybrid in close combat once more. He matched it blow for blow, drawing on both his own combat experience and the technical knowledge flowing from Ymir. Each punch, each block was calculated to keep the prototype's attention fixed on him. Behind them, Ymir's fingers danced across multiple control surfaces. She split her focus, simultaneously hacking the chamber's defenses and crafting a complex sequence to overload the hybrid's neural link. The facility shook violently, chunks of ceiling crashing down around them. The self-destruct sequence had entered its final stages. They were out of time. "Now, Keith!" Ymir's voice rang in his mind. Keith grabbed the hybrid's wrists, holding it in place. Ymir activated her sequence, and the effect was immediate. The prototype's body went rigid, its eyes wide with shock. A high-pitched whine filled the air as the neural feedback loop took effect. But the victory was short-lived. The surge of energy from the overload cascaded through the chamber's systems. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and the remaining turrets fired wildly before short-circuiting. Through the chaos, Keith spotted a previously hidden door sliding open, an emergency exit triggered by the power surge. He locked eyes with Ymir, both realizing this was their chance to escape. They sprinted for the exit, but Keith hesitated, glancing back at the incapacitated hybrid. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over him. The creature was dangerous, yes, but it was also a part of them, a bizarre fusion of their DNA. Ymir sensed his turmoil through their link. She grabbed his arm, her grip firm but not unkind. "Keith, we can't. Think of the mission, the lives at stake." Her words cut through his indecision. With a final look at the hybrid, Keith turned and ran. They burst through the emergency exit into a corridor filled with smoke and flashing warning lights. As they navigated the crumbling facility, they encountered the rest of their team. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, Dr. Zarin, Corporal Ramirez, and Glynn Tellock. The group had fought their way to the central facility, their uniforms torn and faces streaked with grime. "Report!" Morrison barked as they ran towards their hidden stealth ship. Keith and Ymir quickly shared their discoveries. The hybridization program, the crucial data they'd transmitted to Nexus 4, and the prototype they'd left behind. The implications of their findings hung heavy in the air, overshadowed only by the urgency of their escape. They rounded a corner, the exit in sight, when a massive explosion rocked the base. The ceiling collapsed, cutting off their path and separating Keith and Ymir from the rest of the team. "Find another way out," Morrison shouted through the rubble. "We'll rendezvous in orbit." Keith and Ymir shared a look, their enhanced senses already mapping out alternative routes. They sprinted down a side corridor, their movements in perfect sync thanks to their mental link. They emerged into a vast hangar filled with alien shuttles. Without missing a beat, Ymir headed for the nearest craft. Her fingers flew over the control panel, deciphering its operation in seconds. "I've got it," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "Get in." Keith jumped into the co-pilot seat as Ymir fired up the engines. The shuttle hummed to life, lifting off just as another explosion tore through the hangar. They burst out of the disintegrating base, the alien landscape of Xavier 9 stretching out below them. Through the view screen, they watched in awe and horror as the full scale of the alien presence was revealed, and the devastation wrought by the base's destruction. Massive structures crumbled, and strange energy patterns rippled across the planet's surface. As they broke through the atmosphere, a final, cataclysmic explosion erupted behind them, turning night to day. In the eerie quiet of space, Keith and Ymir sat in stunned silence. They had survived, gathered critical intelligence, but the cost had been high. Keith could feel the change in himself, in Ymir, in the bond between them. As Ymir set a course to rendezvous with their team, Keith gazed out at the stars. The hybrid's fate remained unknown, a loose thread in a much larger tapestry. Whatever came next, he knew their lives, and potentially the future of both their species, had been irrevocably altered. The shuttle sped away from Xavier 9, carrying them towards an uncertain future. The mission was over, but Keith sensed that their journey, and the consequences of what they discovered, was only beginning. The mission was over, but Keith sensed that their journey, and the consequences of what they'd discovered, was only the start of something much larger. As if on cue, the shuttle's communication system crackled to life. Admiral Hawk's stern face appeared on the screen, his expression a mixture of relief and urgency. "Keith, Ymir, thank God you're alive. We've analyzed the data you sent. It's worse than we thought." Keith leaned forward, his enhanced senses picking up every nuance in the Admiral's voice. "How bad are we talking, sir?" "Bad enough that High Command has authorized a full-scale counteroffensive. But there's a complication. That hybridization technology, it can't fall into the wrong hands. We need you to go back." Ymir's scaled fingers tightened on the controls. "Back to Xavier 9? But we just barely escaped." Admiral Hawk nodded grimly. "I know it's asking a lot, but you two are our best shot. Your mission is to secure any remaining prototypes or research data before our fleet arrives to neutralize the planet." Keith and Ymir exchanged a look, their mental link buzzing with shared apprehension and willpower. They didn't need words to agree. They were the only ones who could pull this off. "We're on it, Admiral," Keith said. "What's our window?" "The joint human-Cardassian fleet will reach Xavier 9 in 6 hours. You need to be off-planet before then. Good luck and Godspeed." The transmission cut off, leaving Keith and Ymir in tense silence. After a moment, Ymir's hands flew over the alien controls, plotting a course back to the doomed planet. "The shuttle's cloaking technology should get us past their defenses," she said, her voice steady despite the danger ahead. Keith nodded, studying the alien interface. "Let's hope it holds up better than their base did." As they approached Xavier 9, the devastation became clear. Massive fissures crisscrossed the planet's surface, and strange energy patterns pulsed in the atmosphere. Ymir guided the shuttle through the chaos, her movements fluid and precise. They touched down near the ruins of the main facility, the shuttle's cloaking field shimmering around them. As they stepped out, the acrid smell of burning alien technology filled their lungs. Keith's enhanced senses picked up subtle vibrations in the ground. "The planet's becoming unstable. We need to move fast." They navigated the treacherous terrain with uncanny coordination, their mental link allowing them to anticipate each other's movements. Debris shifted underfoot, and more than once Ymir's quick reflexes saved Keith from a nasty fall. After what felt like hours of searching, they discovered a hidden entrance, partially obscured by fallen structures. It led to a bunker that had somehow survived the initial destruction. As the door slid open, cold air rushed out, carrying with it the sterile scent of a laboratory. Keith and Ymir stepped inside, their eyes adjusting to the dim emergency lighting. What they saw made them freeze in their tracks. Dozens of stasis pods lined the walls, each containing a figure in various stages of human-Cardassian hybridization. Some looked almost human, others more Cardassian, but all bore unmistakable signs of genetic manipulation. At the center of the room stood a single active pod. Inside, fully conscious and alert, was their original prototype. Its eyes, a striking blend of human and Cardassian features, fixed on them with eerie intelligence. Before either Keith or Ymir could react, the pod hissed open. The hybrid stepped out, its movements liquid smooth and undeniably powerful. "Creators," it said, its voice a disconcerting mix of their own. "You've returned." Keith's hand went to his weapon, but the hybrid moved with blinding speed, In an instant, it had disarmed him and sent Ymir sprawling across the room. The fight that ensued pushed Keith and Ymir to their absolute limits. The hybrid possessed not only their enhanced abilities, but also an intimate knowledge of their fighting styles. Each time they thought they had an advantage, the creature adapted, using techniques that seemed to blend the best of both species. Ymir caught Keith's eye across the room, a plan forming in her mind. Through their link, she conveyed her idea. It was risky, but it might be their only chance. As one, they charged the hybrid from opposite sides. At the last second, instead of attacking physically, they focused all their mental energy on their link. They created a psychic feedback loop, channeling it directly into the hybrid's neural network. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. The hybrid staggered, its eyes wide with shock. It let out an inhuman screech as its neural pathways overloaded, unable to process the combined mental assault. With a final violent spasm, the hybrid collapsed to the ground, unconscious but still breathing. Keith and Ymir stood over it, panting heavily. The gravity of the situation hit them both at once. This being, dangerous as it was, shared their DNA. In a very real sense, it was their progeny. Ymir knelt beside the hybrid, her hand hovering over its scaled skin. Keith could feel the conflicting emotions surging through their link. Ymir's protective instincts warring with her sense of duty. "We can't let it survive," Keith said softly, his own voice thick with emotion. "The risk is too great." Ymir looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "I know, but we can't kill it. Not like this." Keith's mind raced, searching for a solution. His eyes fell on the stasis pods surrounding them. "We don't have to." Working quickly, they activated the stasis sequence for all the pods, including the one containing their unconscious prototype. They set the bunker's systems to launch the entire complex into deep space, far from any inhabited worlds. As they input the final commands, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. The joint fleet had arrived, and Xavier 9's time was running out. They sprinted back to their shuttle, pushing their enhanced bodies to the limit. The planet was literally crumbling beneath their feet, great chasms opening up and swallowing entire sections of the landscape. Keith took the pilot's seat this time, with Ymir manning the defensive systems. Their minds melded seamlessly as they guided the shuttle through the chaos of Xavier 9's death throes. They burst through the atmosphere just as the planet's core began to collapse. The view behind them was both terrifying and awe-inspiring, a world torn apart by forces beyond imagination. As they sped towards the human flagship, Keith and Ymir sat in exhausted silence. They had succeeded in their mission, but the cost took a toll on them both. The fate of the hybrids, launched into the depths of space, would haunt them for years to come. The shuttle docked with the flagship, and as the airlock cycled, Keith turned to Ymir. No words were needed. Their link conveyed everything. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The airlock door slid open, revealing a corridor filled with anxious officers and medical personnel. As Keith and Ymir stepped aboard, they knew their lives had changed forever. The line between human and alien had blurred, and they stood at the center of it all. Admiral Hawk strode towards them, his face a mix of relief and relentless drive. "Welcome back," he said. "We have a lot to discuss." Keith nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. "Yes, sir, I think we do." As they followed the Admiral deeper into the ship, Keith and Ymir's hands brushed against each other, a small gesture of comfort and solidarity. The mission was over, but their journey, and its implications for both their species, was just beginning.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.